You want to come sit down, I can get you a glass of wine, then you don't have to keep pushing your buttons.
Edit. Could you tell us who was Sasha Siemel?
He had traveled, he'd left home when he was very young, and then he had been a machinist, I believe, and if I recollect correctly, he had worked on sugarcane machinery.
He did a lot of things in South America before I even knew him. I mean, when he jumped ship and landed in the Argentine, he worked for a magazine and went into mechanics and all the things for that.
Before the time that he started hunting jaguars, and so that was itinerant. He'd go from one sugar plantation to another plantation, and then to another. There was a while where he stayed in Buenos Aires maybe for a couple years, but most of the time he was on the move.
And then he traveled in Brazil repairing firearms and all with his brother. And then it was while he was doing that he learned to use the zagaya, or the spear.
He was good-looking and very charming. So people, like men and women, found him very charming and liked him, and he was willing to work very hard to do what had to be done. He was also very smart. I mean, he spoke 7 languages.
He had to be that way. He had to be really, he had to be tough, and that's what he was. He was tough and he was smart.
He always stayed in shape, and there are a lot of pictures of him. He was proud of what his body looked like, especially as he got older, because he stayed in great shape. There are pictures of him that he had my mother take. He doesn't have a shirt on, and he's pulling a bow back, and it's a rear view, so you can see all the muscles in his back. Definitely into physical fitness.
Oh yeah, he loved to talk to people and tell them. He was much more sociable than I was. I didn't want to go and rehash the same thing, but he ate it up. You know, he loved it at his lectures, and people would surround him and ask him this and that, and he was good at it, and he liked it. Well, if he hadn't liked it, he wouldn't have been good at it.
He wrote, he was writing in German, those are the letters you saw, and he also wrote a lot and contacted people, stayed in touch. If he had any leads, he would write them a letter, and if they wrote back, he would write to them. So he was pretty good at marketing himself, which is amazing, because he graduated from 8th grade.
He just also got into the habit of doing a lot of traveling. So I think it was a sense of adventure, the desire to, go beyond the horizon and see what was there. And then once you got there, not just to go to the next horizon, but to do something that was a challenge for you that really put you at risk.
But it always surprised me, because he was my father, when I got to be a teenager, that my friends all just thought he was so good looking. They said, "Your father's so handsome." And that seemed weird to me, because he was my dad, I didn't think of him that way, but yeah, the girls loved him.
And when he was in the United States, even though he wasn't hunting, he was lecturing. He already had gray hair and a beard, and he kind of looked like a college professor.
He always made the offer of a free lecture. And so, yeah, I saw all his films.
You'd see this kind of quiet man, he's just average size, and with the silver beard and the nice quiet presentation and the little German accent, but very easy to understand. And he kind of looked like, you know, your nice, quiet college professor. And they said, what do you do? I kill jaguars with a spear. It's like...
He loved being the center of attention. Oh, yes, no doubt about that.
He had better relationships with men than he had with women. Women didn't hunt, women didn't shoot. Women weren't macho. Women had to be taken care of.
I always knew that I had a father. He was such a presence that everybody knew who my dad was and that I had a dad. And so there wasn't any of that sense of I'm an orphan or anything like that.
He was doing that after he left Buenos Aires, and he met his brother, and they traveled around in Brazil repairing firearms and doing that sort of thing. And then he heard about the spear fight and wanted to see it, and that got him interested. Then he got into the hunting and met some people and started filming, and took his films to the United States, and you know, and that got him, that got people interested. The lectures were what got people interested in going hunting with him.
Her mother was from a well-known, once wealthy Philadelphia family, and they had these debutante parties where at a certain age they would come out. And my grandmother told all the girls, there were 4 of them, that when they wanted to, she would either give them the money that she would have spent on a coming out party, or they could have the coming out party, whatever they wanted. My mother said, I'll take the money. Because she went to one of my father's lectures and she wanted to go, she took her debutante party money and went to Brazil. And that was how she met Helen Post.
I said to my mother, I said, oh, you know, I'd like to see that. And anyway, then I got, through Sasha, I got in touch with Helen Post. She was a relative of the famous Emily Post, who taught you manners.
My grandmother didn't want her going down to the jungle with this strange, fascinating man all by herself. She wanted her to have a companion.
But my mother was never really conventional. She was always just a little different.
My father introduced Helen Post to my mother, and they hit it off, and they went down together.
She didn't want me to go by myself. And it's funny because there was one friend of mine, and I said, do you want, and her family said, oh, no way. Well, a couple of years later, she told me, her family said, why didn't you do something like that? But, you know, people have strange ideas.
And then I think my mother went down a second time. I don't think they got married the first time. I think she went down a second time right after that. And then she just stayed. And she was down there for years. You know, they got married and lived on a houseboat.
I didn't fall in love with him at first sight. I just thought it would be interesting to see all that.
My Aunt Dolly told me once, when she gave me all these clippings, she told me that my mother, when she was growing up, always said she wanted to grow up and marry a big game hunter. I have no idea where that came from.
The first thing I ever shot was a mountain lion. I'd never been a hunter up here. And it wasn't quite daybreak, and Sasha wanted to take pictures. And then afterward, I said, I really don't want to shoot him. He's too beautiful. But I ended up doing it. I never could feel gleeful about killing one of the things.
You know how you have dreams when you're a kid? You know, you want to grow up and do whatever. And that's what she wanted to do. And her dreams came true when she was like 22 years old. It's amazing. And she lived down there. She lived that life.
When I shot my first jaguar, the smaller one that's in there, Sasha was afraid I wasn't going to hit it right. So when he got in the ground, and he dropped his loaded revolver into the holster, and of course it went off and shot himself in the leg. So that took care of next couple of months nursing him.
he didn't have a lot of patience, and I'm sure he saw this girl coming from a background as she did and assumed that she was going to be like a little prissy whiner. And I think she probably continued to surprise him. And now that you mention it, that's probably why she shot the jaguars and why she learned to use a bow and arrow. And I mean, she killed a jaguar with a bow and arrow. And it's the same thing with a mountain lion. She, so that was probably it, to show him that she wasn't just this little priss from Philadelphia who had enough money to go on a hunting trip.
I was never basically a killer, though. I've killed a lot of things and wrung a lot of chickens' necks. Come on, Birdie. He's showing. I think the other side is prettier. Pretty soon, in another few weeks, they'll be losing their feathers. They lose them every year. And usually the babies are born around this time. And so then when the babies get a little bigger and start getting rambunctious, they lose their feathers.
I suppose when I was younger, a child, it was something that he probably wouldn't have discussed with me. And then when I was older, usually we were engaged in conversations about our own selves, and he and I shared a lot of interest in physical fitness, and he gave me some good tips about how to try to stay in shape when you're on the road, and various things like that, because he lived out of motel rooms a lot and still was able to keep himself in pretty good shape.
And I think my brother Sasha really had a tough time with him. And it could be why there have been periods of time when he doesn't really seem to want to have anything to do with even the memory of his father.
Also, there was another incident where when I was around, I think maybe 16 years old, I think it was an incident involving a dog that I'd gotten that tried to attack him. I had it on the leash and it didn't succeed. But in that exchange, I yelled at him. And he didn't say anything at the time, but a few days later, he told me, said, I lived in Brazil for an awful long time, and I picked up some of the attributes that the folks down there have. And one of the things is that you don't yell at people. And so, please don't yell at me. And it just really worked, because had he yelled back or blown his stack or whatever, it wouldn't have had the same kind of impact.
I think it was harder for the boys, especially for my brother Sasha, because that was his first son, and the boys were, I guess, felt under more pressure,
Depois nasceu o Sachinha, aí ele era muito pequenininho, esse relacionamento eu não me lembro. Aí foi a grande alegria do pai de ter mais terceiro filho. Aí o Sasha tinha 60 anos.
He wanted me to be a hunter. He really wanted it with all his heart and soul. And I didn't want to do that. And he never pressured me. He understood, and he didn't want to do to me what had been done to him. And I thought that showed a lot of character.
This is when I was a senior in high school, and I spent most of the time in Rio. And then in the summer, my parents and my brothers, my mother and my brothers went home, and my father had a hunter coming down to hunt with him, and someone who had paid to hunt with him. And I went out there too, and my father really wanted me to get my Jaguar before this guy did. And I told him that it really didn't matter. I really didn't want to kill one anyway. My brother killed 3 of them when he was 13 years old. And Carly was too little to kill anything. He was just like a little kid. So my brother Shino, we call him, that's his nickname, Shino. My brother Shino is the only one who got his Jaguar. And we were all okay with that.
E eu te disse que ele era uma figura paterna, mas bem, não dócil, assim, melequenta. Era um homem. E aí tivemos uma história longa que me gravou, que foi justamente esse que ele me ensinava a caçar e dizia, você tem que caçar descalço, porque quem pisa descalço sabe onde está andando. Como ele também disse uma coisa inesquecível para mim, que foi o seguinte, você tem que ter coragem de andar no mato sem revólver, porque com revólver você sempre é prepotente, você se acha o tal, enquanto que se você andar descalço e sem arma, você vira parte da floresta.
He's a total perfectionist, and he could be a real pain over it. And that's exactly what he was. But he was always fair about everything. You did him a favor, he'd do you a favor. He was very strict with his kids when he was around. But he wasn't around enough, so it really didn't matter.
But the one thing I really do remember is when I was 3 years old, I learned to swim. And my father built this big wooden box that he sank in the river so the piranhas wouldn't get us. And we could just climb into this box. It was maybe 4 feet by 6 feet, but we were very small. I was only 3. And I learned to do the doggy paddle in there when I was 3 years old, so I remember that.
Mas com o Sachinha eu não me lembro. Agora com as 2 meninas era sempre muito carinhoso, mas muito objetivo também. Não era assim um amor de macaco, como nós chamávamos. Então era assim, Sandra, Dora, Jorge, venham cá. Jorge, você vai junto, vocês tragam 3 peixes assim assado. E aí vinha um sorriso de carinho que apagava aquele primeiro susto de um comando. Aí não era um comando, aí era uma figura paterna. Absolutamente paterna.
I was proud of my father. When I was small, I was scared of him because he was in his 50s when he had his first child, and he wasn't used to small children. He thought he could say things one time, and that's the way it would be. And then, we'd forget, and we'd do it anyway. And it was, so he would get angry, and we would get scared. But then, particularly when I got to be a teenager, I sort of got over that and got to know him as just a really nice person. And I know how aggravating little kids can be, especially if you're not used to them.
And I guess you kids were kind of afraid of him when he got in a temper. Well, it's like a lot of men. They don't realize how strong they are, and they get a little kid and whack and, But the kids still liked him.
I got to admire how skilled the guy was. I mean, I saw the things that he'd made. I saw pictures of the houseboat that he built. I saw how he raised these kids in a very dangerous environment. On a houseboat where beneath them the water was full of piranhas. In fact, but Dora put her leg over the side of the houseboat one time and got it chewed rather badly. And so what he did was go down there, got with a net, got her out, got the piranha, and put her on the boat and chopped it up in little pieces. And then they had to be very, very careful with the kids because of all kinds of wild animals. And that took a lot of courage and a lot of discipline. So we can understand why he needed people to listen to him.
He always stayed in shape. He always did exercises. He had these dumbbells, you know, it's a ball of iron and another ball of iron put together with a stick. And what he used to do, weighed 100 pounds, is he'd lean down. He would do this to impress our friends, too. He'd lean down, he'd pick it up, and he'd lift it over his head with one arm. They loved him. They definitely, yeah, the ladies really loved him. And because he was charming and he was good looking and he had these really nice blue eyes, you know, and he just, yeah, they liked him a lot.
He was very comfortable in the fact that he was famous and that he was admired. No doubt about it. He wasn't at all shy. And he obviously liked the fact that he got attention from women. Even though he was married, he liked it. And women did pay attention to him, even at those times. Well, he was still good looking. He was still virile. After all, he'd fathered a child when he was in his 60s.
I remember him saying that his parents were pretty strict, that children were to be seen and not heard, and that I remember, as I recollect, discussions about, he had his brother who he had told me about, and I believe that there was one of his older sisters who he also felt was particularly was kind to him, you know, was one who he felt looked out for him, and that he grew up poor. And I remember I used to I'd wear jeans, you know, that had holes in them and that sort of thing, and he'd just laugh about it. He'd say, you know, you're wearing those because you want to. Essentially, I had to wear them because I had to, and he never wore anything with patches in it. That just, you know, that was just something that he wasn't going to do because he had grown up under much more constricted circumstances.
Oh yeah, he had weaknesses. One of the weaknesses was that he did not have an open mind. His ideas about life were formed fairly early, and all of his weaknesses were about survival. And while he could be generous for the most part, he looked at everything in terms of his own self-interest.
But in terms of interpersonal relationships with people in his family, he didn't hold a grudge. He'd be mad at you, and he'd let you know about it. And then once it was over, it was over. Welcome you back with open arms. And it was, I think, the sign of a gracious spirit.
Even in terms of his own family. I remember the time when he was working over in his museum, putting it together. And he was an excellent carpenter. You know, he could build shelves that were as good as anything you would get in from a first-rate craftsman, because he was a first-rate craftsman. But he needed a lot of help getting stuff moved, and he needed a lot of work. And his oldest son didn't want to help him. He had other things going on. He was going out to football games, or he was dating girls, and he wouldn't do it. And Sasha got furious with him, and I thought that was really unjustified. Really furious.
There were a lot of people he didn't like, but I can't remember exactly why. Well, if they were too pushy, and if they, I don't know. He liked people who were good sports, and like the people that hunted with him, a number of them became really, really good friends because they were good sports and didn't complain about everything, and, you know, when they were out in the field.
That's probably the main thing. I just really wish that that he would have been around more, that I could have spent, you know, would have had that day-to-day contact of having your father there.
A minha primeira impressão você tem que entender que eu fui com meu pai, com minha mãe, e já esperava encontrar um grande homem. E eu era novo. Então, a primeira impressão foi absolutamente de dar a mão para um herói, porque eu já tinha essa imagem pré-fixada. Eu me lembro, por exemplo, vocês querem ver piranha comer um jacaré? Oh, queremos. Agora, também não se esqueça que eu tinha 9 anos, 10 anos, 11 anos e eu era um fanático da natureza. Só que o Sasha tinha um jeito muito, muito especial. E isso que eu não esqueço, isso que eu sempre olhava, queria até imitar. Ele tinha uma compostura reta, uns olhos firmes, olhava para você, todos os gestos eram claros. Então, minha impressão foi de uma grande personalidade.
I guess what I admired most about the guy was the fact that he was such an incredible athlete. And I only knew him when he was in his late 60s and up until he died about 80 or 81. And during that time, he went to Brazil several times.
Olha, eu conheci o Sasha quando meus pais foram para o Pantanal de Miranda Estância, caçar onça. Na época, isso era uma grande aventura que se fazia e se caçava também e pescava outros animais. E na época, a Fazenda Miranda Estância tinha 3 caçadores profissionais. E esses caçadores recebiam por onça morta, porque as onças comiam muito gado. E um era famoso, o Sasha Siemel. E como meu pai soube dele, a gente foi para lá. E aí, imediatamente, ele virou meu herói, porque era o homem que estava no ambiente selvagem, que um moleque como eu, com 7 anos eu tinha quando eu fui a primeira vez, sonhava quase um tipo de um Tarzan, um sujeito que sabia tudo, que olhava no chão, via os rastros dos animais, falava aqui passou um tatu, ali passou uma anta. E aí, isso foi em 1947. Minto, foi em 46, eu tinha 9 anos então.
But when I was up there, I could see him practicing with a bow and arrow. He also had a rifle. He was a dead shot. Pistol, he was a dead shot. And with that arrow, I mean, it was like a 90-pound pole. For him, it was nothing. And he'd hit the target maybe 60 feet away every time. So he was kind of incredible.
I never remember hearing anything negative about the show itself. Sometimes people say, did that really happen? This, that, and the other. But they came away fully entertained.
Minha mãe achava que o Sasha era muito showman, mas eu já não posso falar isso do meu herói, mas além disso eu tenho certeza hoje, como um homem mais maduro, como um médico e tudo, eu acho que tem 2 coisas. Uma é, você espera de uma pessoa uma certa atitude. Se você vai no médico e ele está todo sujo, ou bêbado, ou esquisito, ou descalço, sei lá, ou é louco, você não vai mais. Se ele é um blefe, um showman, você também desconfia. Mas se ele é vestido normalmente, te recebe tudo, lava as mãos e tal, você acha que é a imagem de um médico, vamos dizer. E um caçador que vai te levar no mato, você tem que ter confiança que ele vai te defender, que ele não vai se perder. O negócio é perigoso, o negócio é longo, o negócio é quente, você tem momentos dramáticos. Eu já assisti, por exemplo, de você ver o cara praticamente morrer quando abelhas africanas atacam. Um cara tinha 196 picadas e nós aplicamos na língua adrenalina e tudo para salvar ele. Bom, mas então você também não vai com um showman, um simples showman. Um simples showman é um showman. Quer dizer, você vai com um homem que sabe. Só que também esse homem vai dar o show que ele está levando um estojo contra abelhas, que ele sabe lidar com cobras. E ele então vai falar, gente, deixa comigo, eu sei fazer. E aí você não pode interpretar isso como um showman. Está de acordo comigo?
I really enjoyed having the opportunity to live the way we did. And as the older I get and the more I live in this world, the more I know how special it was to have a childhood like that.
When my father was hunting jaguars, there were jaguars that killed people. I mean, it really was a different time. They actually were a threat. And of course, if you look at things in a broader context, you can say, well, as between humans and jaguars, the jaguars may have the claim of right because the jaguars lived in the Pantanal before the cattleman came in.
Lá, na época, as fazendas eram imensas. E, aliás, o Pantanal daquela época era um exemplo de convivência do homem com a natureza. E eu tenho visto um livro de 1910, na Fazenda Bodoquena, que era uma fazenda de 4.000 quilômetros quadrados, e lá os ingleses, era de ingleses, anotavam cada onça morta e quanto se pagava. E esse sistema vinha até 1960.
And those same things happen today, and I believe that almost anyone would agree that if there were a bear running loose in Albuquerque, and occasionally they come in on the outskirts, but it was running loose and it was actually attacking people, it would be killed. And so I think that context helps you understand my father's view of how a jaguar was something to be hunted.
E a bem da verdade, esse sistema ainda existe hoje na Amazônia. Grandes fazendas pagam pelas onças mortas.
But he had such an admiration for them and such a, when he talked about them and when he, with the cubs that he had, you could see the affection that he had for them. There was one of them called Ferdinand, and he called him Ferdinand because, like Ferdinand the bull, this jaguar seemed to be different than the others. It seemed to be less of a wild animal. But, and the reason I say that is that with jaguars, once they change their teeth, you don't see jaguars in circuses, you don't see jaguars in zoos, and that's because, as my father explained it, once they change their teeth and become an adult, you cannot trust them. They will attack you, and they're not going to listen to what you say.
Well, he did it for a good many years, and when that was his business for a while. He was doing the gun repairing kind of on the side, but he went where the hunting was good, and the ranchers were happy to see him because a full-grown jaguar will kill about one head a week. Well, if you have a small herd, that can make a big dent in your, Now, if you're up to the part where you have thousands, it doesn't make that as much difference. But if you're a small rancher with, a few hundred head of cattle, one a week can make a big dent in your herd. So they were always happy to have him come.
I really really admire what my father did, and he was certainly a conservationist in that he would never just go out and kill for the sake of killing. He was doing this for a living. The cattle ranchers paid him to do it.
But when we were married, his business was more taking the people from here or from Europe hunting, not so much just going and killing for the people that, needed it.
And I believe that if he were alive today, he would be doing everything that he could to make sure that endangered species are not eliminated, and particularly that they're not eliminated when the way that people eliminate them is just by commercial means. You burn out their territory, or by some sort of, hunting by helicopters, machine gunning them, or something like that, where you have these, where there is just absolutely no chance for the animal to just simply live their life as they want to.
Because this is a very conservative area, and anybody who moves in from outside is sort of looked upon as a stranger for the first 30 or 40 years. And we were stranger than most people, because at that point, when we were little kids, we had jaguars back there, and we had snakes, and my father was an adventurer, and he always did lectures for us at school, so all the kids would know that, and yet it didn't feel unusual to me because it's the only thing I knew. So it was this dichotomy of what it felt like. Yeah, I knew it was unusual in a way, but the idea of being scared of some of the things people would talk about how scary Brazil would be, and we always just wanted to go back. Even now, I was gone for 40 years and went back in 2000 for the first time in 40 years, and it just felt like home. Like it seemed so familiar, especially when but even Rio, but even when I got out to the Pantanal, it hadn't changed that much, and it was home. It was great.
Well, he went and contacted the person, and then Joaquin Guato agreed to teach him how to be a hunter himself, and he did teach him that, and basically my father was his apprentice.
Então ele trabalhava como um sujeito técnico, ele era um homem, vamos dizer, para a região intelectual. Só que ele pegou gosto de caçar onça, ele tinha um velho índio que ensinou ele até a pegar as onças com a zagaia, e ele se fascinou pela caça à onça, mas não era pago pela fazenda, era mais pago depois por turistas.
That was his definition of sport. Sport wasn't just going out and seeing how good a shot you are. Sport was something where there was a real challenge and there was a real risk.
Ah, isso é fantástico. Isso eu conto, só vai demorar 5 minutos. Bom, você vai acampar em regiões solitárias, porque a onça não vive perto das casas das pessoas. Vai um pouco mais longe. Você vai perto das águas.
You know, you had the hounds and you got up early and went to any place where the natives had seen jaguar tracks or anything, you know.
Então, como você vai caçar? Você vai caçar observando rastros. Aqui, por exemplo, passou uma manada de queixada. Queixadas, as varas de queixadas podem ter 100 porcos. E são até perigosos. Atacam até cavalo e tudo na época. A gente tinha que segurar os cachorros, tudo. Aí, se a vara tinha passado, a gente ia antes ver se tem uma onça indo atrás dessas queixadas. E olhava pelo rastro. Toda uma arte. Se é fêmea, se é macho velho, se é macharrão.
And you didn't always get a fresh scent because, you know, the hounds couldn't follow a scent that was several days old. It had to be fresh.
Para saber se tinha um rastro de uma fêmea com 2 filhotes e ia embora, porque aqui não vamos caçar, não vamos perder tempo com fêmea. Aí achava um macharrão. Em geral, o macharrão tem o território 3 vezes maior, tem 3 fêmeas dentro do território dele. Aí era uma onça parda, pesou 84 quilos, era como uma leoa. Mas, opa, isso é uma onça parda bonita. A diferenciação dos rastros de parda e pintada é difícil, dá em 80% de certeza. Quer dizer, quando é um macharrão pintado grande, não, aí você vê. Mas quando é assim, um tamanho entre uma fêmea pintada e um macho pardo grande, pode ter dúvidas. Aí, bom, aí soltava os cachorros e aí começava a corrida. E a corrida podia ser de tudo. Você poderia correr o dia inteiro e não ver nada. Você poderia correr e ver a onça pular num rio, passar o rio. Você tinha que nadar com os cavalos no rio. Se chegava do outro lado, a cachorrada não achava mais o rastro. Ou você podia fazer assim, chegava lá, aonde é? Opa, tá aqui a onça.
Usually they'd go up a tree. And then then it was just like bird shooting. You wouldn't. And Sasha was there with the spear when it fell down, and you know, when it fell down it wasn't completely dead, and the dogs would gather around it, then he would finish it off on the spear.
The subject of religion often came up, and it was obvious that he didn't believe in Christianity, didn't believe in Judaism, didn't believe in any organized religion, but he had some kind of a deep spiritual connection with nature and these wild animals, even though he killed them. He was more like, he reminded me of the American Indians. The way they feel. I mean, he loved these jaguars even though he had to kill them.
That one I shot when Sandra was a baby. How old is she now? She's 65.
She's very old, yeah.
Good grief. Yeah, this was a big guy. Yeah, he was at least 300 pounds.
He never lost hope. when I went to see him in the hospital, I used to go every day. He was 80 years old, and he was dying, and I'd go every day. And I can remember him saying, he spent his 80th birthday in the hospital, and I can remember him saying, you know, I've had a good life. I'm an old man, and I'm ready to die. There are just a few more things I want to do. And I thought, that's a great way to die. You've accomplished a lot of what you want, but there are a few more things you still want to do. So that was...
Agora, é claro, cada época tem os seus heróis. Certo herói, numa certa fase, pode, numa outra, ser julgado como vilão, pode ser julgado como uma pessoa ruim até, você poderia dizer. Mas isso é muito errado.
I sincerely believe that if he were alive today, he would be a conservationist.
Eu acho que ele foi grande conservador, não preservador. No Brasil se só fala em preservar. Preservar, não don't touch.
So I believe if he were alive today that he would be speaking for the ongoing preservation of these really magnificent animals.
Mas conservar, viver junto com as onças, com o gado, com os pássaros e tirar uma onça ou outra onça perigosa.
Yeah, he did like them. And he did kill them.
One of the things that I think is most telling is that even when he was hunting jaguars, he never killed any other animal, and when I was hunting with him, I killed a number of other animals, but I killed them because we needed food.
E quando se faz isso, mostrar para todo mundo as belezas do Pantanal, vale muito mais para mim do que essa falsificação aí. Caçador, assassino, acabou, entendeu? Então, this would be my message.
This was Sasha long. I didn't know him when he looked like that.
you.